another watercolor tutorial with Laurel Hart. One thing that I enjoy doing is painting from the many photos that I take on vacation. These photos that I bring home are really my prized souvenirs from my travels, and they remind me of some of the amazing places that I've had the privilege of visiting. I'm old enough to remember the days before we had digital cameras where we just had film, and so you'd sort of have to be kind of cautious with how many pictures you took. You'd have to ration your photos. Should I take a picture of my kids or that very interesting stranger over there? Often it would be the stranger that won out. So when we show our family vacation pictures, quite frequently everyone's asking, "Who's that guy?" And I say, "I have no idea, but look at the cool light on his beard." Now with digital cameras and phone cameras, there's virtually no limit to how many pictures we can take. And these paintings that I do from these travels provide memories of the trips that I've taken and many of the historical icons I've seen. It's really a great way to keep a record or a travel history and to document where you've been. Sometimes things that you see may not be there the next time you visit. In this way, it makes these paintings even more valuable. For example, in the year 2000, I visited Paris with my husband and two of my sons. We had the enjoyable privilege of visiting the Cathedral of Notre Dame. Now, in light of the recent tragedy of the fire that almost destroyed the cathedral, the pictures that I took of it are all the more precious to me. One of the beautiful things about the cathedral was the amazing acoustics of the chapel. One of the organists said that the sound could reverberate for 10 seconds after his hands had left the keyboard. The organ was indeed one of the most valuable relics in the cathedral and one of the most famous musical instruments of its kind in all of history. Luckily, the organ was not destroyed by the fire and will be able to be preserved and repaired despite the water and smoke damage that it sustained. What would the cathedral be without those beautiful chords that the organ could produce? Music and art have a lot in common. I've been thinking about this lately because of a comment someone wrote in. It comes from TN Towers, and I want to give them credit for this thought. They said, "I can't help thinking of color triads as musical chords. They set the mood just like chords do." That's really true, and today I want to talk about this, talking about using triads to set the mood in a painting. We talk about tones, keys, and triads in music, and we talk about those very same things in art. A major chord is a triad of 3 notes that has a bright, cheerful, upbeat sound. We might liken it to a high-key triad in art. A minor chord is made up of a triad where the middle note of the chord is lowered a half step, creating a more somber, melancholy, or sad sound. So pretend, if you will, that this is the organ in the Notre Dame Cathedral. And pretend that I'm a wonderful organist and I'm going to play you some examples of what a major chord sounds like and a minor chord sounds like. So the major chord is the 1-3-5, and it sounds upbeat, it sounds happy, and it sounds bright. So in order to make a minor chord, what happens is the third of the chord is lowered a half a step. So it will sound like this. So that's the sound of a minor chord. And that is much more somber, much more melancholy, and much more subdued. And so I want to talk about that a little bit because I started thinking how that really is like a low-key triad in art. So carrying this idea over into a triad in color, a minor chord or a minor triad in art would be to take 2 pure colors and then the third one to lower or to mute or make more grayed down, neutralized. So for example, if I want to take a pure a pure blue. Let's say I'm going to use my, that's my indanthrene blue. And another high key or pure red would be my permanent alizarin crimson. And then let's say the yellow of the triad we are going to lower or tone down. And in this case, I'm going to really use a yellow that's way toned down. I'm going to use transparent oxide red as the yellow in this triad. And I can get some very subtle and more muted, understated color by using this triad. So I'm going to do just a little swatch of this on a paper here. And you can see how much more muted or grayed down this color scheme would be. And it has the same feeling really as a minor chord in music. And I thought that was just really an interesting comparison that really does work. I'm using much more concentrated pigment of it over here. But you can see the beautiful grays and mixtures of using those three colors in this minor triad or low-key triad that can be made using those colors. And so I thought for the painting that I want to do today, which is going to be a photo that I took on that trip when we were in France, a photo of the Notre Dame Cathedral, I would use this color triad to paint more of a subdued or a more melancholy memory of that scene because of what's happened to that building at this point. So I wanted to just show you a couple other photos that I took of Notre Dame on this trip. And you see how these become really treasured memories now that this beautiful edifice is now ruined almost or practically destroyed. So I'm pleased that I still have these as historical recordings of this beautiful building in France. So I'm going to get started on this painting, and I've already got a drawing on here. I just freehanded this on, and it's pretty loose, but I want to keep the painting fairly loose. So I haven't taken a lot of time to put in all the detail, which hopefully will come in towards the end. But so I want to build a foundation in this painting where I'll start out with these tones of the triad over here and hopefully make this painting come to life in more of a minor key. So I'm going to be starting out with a Winsor Newton Pure Squirrel Mop. This is a number 1. And I think for the sky, I think I'm just going to leave that white. There's a tiny bit of color in here, but I think I'm just going to leave the sky totally white and start on the building. And I'll just be trying to jump over my whites, which are in the corners here where the sun is hitting the cathedral. I'm just going to get this all on there in these tones, setting up an underpainting foundation in this more subdued color scheme than I normally start out with. And then once I've got that in, I'll come back and start to pay more attention to the details in here. I want to leave those whites that I can see right in here. I think that's part of the roof back behind there. There's some kind of a little pale tower back in there. But I'm just, again, like I normally do, letting this all pull down on its own, using the gravity and the slant of my paper to get this all in there, and coming back into this wet bead to continue bringing it down. There are some whites here that I do want to not miss. But if you can do it like this, it'll continue to just be a nice smooth wash. I'm trying to leave a little bit of that white to show that the sunlight is coming through there on the side of the building. And then in here, I am going to do a little bit more pure pigment, because I'm going to come back in there and try to capture that tree that's in bloom there. So that's why I'm going with a little bit of stronger pink there. And also, I've got some green here too on these trees, so I'm going to want to get a little bit of that foliage in as I'm coming down as well. And then I'll go back to the neutral, more neutral color down below here. But all of that is going to be captured in this first wash. So I'm just capturing basically the abstract pattern of light and shadow. And now when I'm coming down into these little more tiny pieces of light and shade in here, I'm going to switch to a smaller brush. And I'm going to need to be really careful here to preserve the white. Okay. And we're going to want a little more green in here too, where all of this is happening with the green there. So this is ending up here with these little feet of the crowd back here that we want to keep going there. I want to make myself a little purer green here for some of this foliage in here. It's going to be coming in through here. But my main concern at this point is to connect everything into one big shape of shade. And down here I've got what appears to be some flowers, so I'm just going to put in a little bit of that color. And again over here, I'm just wanting to catch a little bit of the darks in there as these little figures. Okay, I'll leave a little bit of whites in there, but that's pretty much the gist of it. But I'm gonna get in just a little bit of these swatches of color in here while that paint's a little bit wet still, so that that's gonna look like people back in there. Get some heads on some of them too. But when you're painting little crowds of people like that, they're just little blobs of color pretty much. Somebody in here has got on a kind of a bright red shirt, so I'm going to get that in there. But see, you do not need to indicate much more than that for a distant crowd of people. So now that I've got that dried, my initial wash, I'm going to come back in with the second session on the painting. And this will be using those same colors of the Triad with some pops of brighter color here and there. But for the most part, I'll be using those same three pigments, the indanthrene blue, the permanent alizarin crimson, and the transparent red oxide as the yellow of the Triad. And that is the muted down color that's making this a minor feel of a Triad. So now that I'm coming back in on this, I am back down to a smaller brush to work in a little bit more of the details. And I'll be starting to just put some of those in. And I am working on dry paper, but I will, in some places, pull the color in and out of these windows because I don't want them looking too rigid or too structured. So and I also want to let these Triad colors mix a little bit on the paper so that I still keep some very clean color, but I'm letting it mix and bleed on the paper a little more. And then again, I can sort of tell that some of the building is in light over here, so I'm trying to indicate that. And the way that I'll maybe do that is by bringing a little bit of a wash over this whole part here. And now you can sort of start to see a little better what I meant by this being a more somber feel to the painting. And I don't want to describe all of the detail in here. That's part of the poetic beauty of painting this way, is not everything is spelled out. This is more of an impression of what the cathedral looks like or feels like. Maybe do that a little bit of a more of a yellowish tone inside there, I guess. Now, if I've got this dry enough over here, I am gonna try to put in these windows a little bit darker. But I want to keep them a little softened so they bleed out a little bit into the other color that's already down. And what that does is it just gives it a bit of a softer edge. Okay. And take a little bit out for a bit of atmospheric pleasure. Now down in here, I do have some of this green. That I want to be able to get in there. I'm coming back in there where I really probably shouldn't yet. It's still a little wet. After a while of mixing these, I kind of have to renew my Triad and get back to a little bit of the cleaner color. So that's what I'm doing, getting some more of the clean color back out. I just think things are much more interesting if they are a suggestion rather than totally finished. From detail to detail. So I'm just continuing to go back over this with these washes of the same mixture. Trying now to get in some of the detail. And I'm trying not to work too much in one place or another, as you can kind of see. And I'll see if I'm dry enough over here to put these windows in now. Still a little too wet. I just get a little bit over anxious sometimes to get some of these things in. And when you do that, it kind of takes some of the spontaneity out of it. I think those are actually quite a bit littler. And then this little business here, I am going to do that with negative painting. But I don't really want that all spelled out too much. This is back in shadow over here, so So now most of my job is pretty much getting in some of this painting behind stuff. And don't worry, I will blend some of that in so it's not so perfect. Sometimes it's a lot just these little tiny darks that kind of describe the thing that we know in our mind. Our mind will accept something even though it's very abstract. If there's just enough description there that we recognize it. now down in here, I think I may leave the tree branches, some of them as negative space, even though they are actually, in actuality, darker than what's behind. I think I'm going to paint behind them. But now you can sort of start to see that tree take more shape there in the foreground. And same over here, there's a little more of that greenery. From the tree. Now I'm cutting around maybe some heads of people there. And I'll get these darker doors back in here that again leaving some shapes for maybe heads of the crowd. pulling out some of the whites over here. And then back in here, this this building. I'm just trying to kind of indicate that there's some kind of building back there, and it's in the sun, so I'll probably leave it a little bit bright like that. And then it's coming down around a bunch of people there too. So that little crowd starts to finish off a little better as well. I don't want that too prominent, so I'm just melding it back a little bit. And then there's this part of the cathedral that is back here. If I had got that tree in here, I could have disguised some of this stuff back here that I can't really see what's there. But I didn't do it soon enough, so I'm probably going to leave that out. Okay, now I think we can put in more of these little archway things up here that are kind of recognizable to this building. And same over on the other side. But we don't want them to be all exactly the same. I I don't really want to ruin my suggestiveness of those windows either. I don't know what those bumpy things are on the spires, but they're kind of, I don't know, iconic, whatever you would maybe call it. And I don't want those spires to be quite that dark either. I'm going to blot them back a little. Probably need to do a little cleanup here. Again, my paper is really crucial to my method of painting because I can lift so much out of it. It's the Winsor Newton cold press 140 pound. And painting a little bit behind some of those leaves give the effect of that tree being out in front. Okay, then this little bit of tree down here, I need to get this part anchored down a little better. And getting a little bit of dark. So at the end of this, once you've got that understructure in of that first wash, you're basically there. You just have to, the final little details are pretty easily put in. To set things off and define things just a little bit better. And you don't need to go really too far because the eye can fill in what isn't there. I want to pull some of the fence up out of that. Out of that foreground there. And then let's maybe do a little bit over here to get this guy anchored in to the painting. Just kind of brightening up that green there a little bit. I think I'll carry some of that up into the tree here too, because it just seems like it needs to look like that's more foliage up in here. And it makes the rest of that color scheme look a little bit more somber with that really bright springish green foliage down there. And then maybe just a little bit more highlights on, or dark places on the people. And put in a little bit of heads in here. And probably, I think our sun's coming this way, so I would think we're going to have some kind of little shadows connecting the figures in here. So it makes it look like they're grounded. A little bit. And it looks like they could use just some little touches of darks in between here and there to set them off. They don't need to be indicated as individual people because they want to stay as a crowd back there. And I want to put in maybe just a couple little touches of red. Somebody in a red coat or a red something. All right. Where these deeper shadows are towards the bottom of the building, I think there's going to be darker shadows in there. See, if I don't soften that back, it just sticks out so much. I'm getting to a point where I need to leave things alone or I'm going to be sorry. Now the last thing that I'm going to do is to actually put in this branch. I kind of like how that's going to help disguise some of this stuff that I really don't see what's going on there. So I am going to start out with it coming across here, and this is always scary. Come in across your painting. And some of this I think I'll switch over to a little rigger to do too. A rigger is a brush that's just got really long bristles, so you can do a lot of stuff with it. And that's really kind of easy to overdo, so you need to be a little bit careful. I think I'm going to stop about there. I want to finish up a little bit more over in here, but I think at this point I need to take a break from this and reevaluate it in a little bit, see what else it needs. But that is the end of this demonstration today, painting in a minor key in watercolor. Thanks for joining me, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.